Okay, welcome, Darren.
Thanks so much for all your flexibility and patience on the technology. And I also wanted to thank Joy for the opportunity to record last week's session, re-record it with all the slides. So hopefully that's available or will be available soon for you guys. And I'm not going to assume that everyone who's on this session attended last time. So I'm going to do a very quick summary of my approach, setting the stage for us to practice a couple of exercises based on the content I'm going to share today. So I'm excited about having at least a chunk of this time be grounded in practice and an opportunity for you to ask questions, share observations. Joy and I discussed that for this beginning part, we'll go ahead and record it. And if for some reason the recording is hindering engagement, if you guys feel like you'd be more comfortable turning that off, once I've covered some points and guided an exercise, then we can certainly do whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable enough to share. I do want to say that part of my style in mindfulness is to be very careful not to make it as a replacement for therapy. It doesn't replace talking to a therapist and exploring your narrative issues, your what I think of as your personal story problems, the things you're trying to address with a professional. I think of mindfulness as exercising your attention. And actually, the more you exercise your attention with mindfulness, the more you get out of other supports like therapy, like connecting with friends and family, and even physical exercise. It's not, I don't see it as a replacement for any of those things. I think it enhances, makes those things more robust. But that means when we're doing mindfulness practice together, I'm very careful to steer the conversation so that they don't need to be personally revealing about your narrative, about your story. So we're talking about noticing sensations and perceptions as opposed to noticing what things mean. That means when we share things, it's really about sharing, I heard a sound, I felt a sensation, I noticed my breath, I noticed the feelings of breathing, I noticed relaxation, I noticed tension. So it's not, I'm frustrated with my boss or my coworker, even though, some degree of that, you can say, when I find myself in a boring meeting, I notice tension in my jaw. But it doesn't need to go into the personal details. So I feel like there's a way that your privacy is really guarded even though you're talking, because we're just talking about sensory details. When I think of mindfulness, based on my experience of going to intensive practice every year and then practicing every day, both formally, meaning with a timer and a clear intentional exercise that I'm doing, as well as the pauses I make throughout the day to notice and pay attention closely to some sensory detail. I think of this being very parallel to what we do with exercising our bodies using physical exercise. And just as we know with physical exercise, the exercises we do, different exercises support different physical capacities, physical strength, flexibility, maybe heart health or cardiovascular health. The same thing, there's a variety of exercises we can do with mindfulness to target specific things, like the ability to focus, the ability to regulate emotions by being aware of emotions as they're playing out in real time. And one of the most powerful things, I think, is not just being able to notice and savor relaxation, but to be able to get better at being uncomfortable. It's really, especially at this time, I think it's always, but the need for this is heightened. I think that mindfulness doesn't just help us manage stress. It actually helps us be more resilient so that we can savor pleasant moments more, but also fight with unpleasant moments less. That unpleasant moment could be physical discomfort, emotional discomfort, uncertainty, confusion, not knowing a decision to make. My argument or my thesis is that if we exercise our attention in specific ways, we can get better at really savoring sensations that are pleasant, taking unpleasant sensations less personally, resisting them less, practicing that as a skill, not as a personality trait, but as a skill that can be trained and developed with practice and with habitual practice. And when we do this, it starts to equip us to be able to respond more effectively to the challenges of real life, which is just a constant stew of pleasant and unpleasant, and a shifting stew at that. So it's sort of, instead of waiting for the conditions to be perfect, equipping ourselves to be able to respond to the conditions as they come. I call this in general, the ability to feel more at home in your life, in the messiness of your real life. I think most of us, by default, understandably, we're waiting to feel at home when the conditions are pleasant and comfortable. If I'm comfortable, if I feel safe, if I feel certain, then I feel at home. But I would argue that we can get better at feeling at home even when those things are not available. And now it's not letting me, let me try one more time. It's not letting me advance the slide, Joyce, so if you wouldn't mind, if you can hear me, I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you, but I have the capacity to change the slide now. Can you?
Let me try it.
You give me control.
Oh, sorry about that. For some reason, it's not letting me control my slide, but there you go. And as you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about, I'm assuming we'll be up here. So what is mindfulness? From my perspective, Joy, let me know if you want me to pause or anything, but from my perspective, mindfulness is about making this distinction between two modes of attention. One is making sense of the world. And we do this through thinking about the past and future. Joy, are you able to pull it back up or no?
I'm reloading because I can't access it on here.
Okay.
Anymore, like I could earlier.
So there's, I think, of two modes of attention. One is the default mode. And we are remembering, we're evaluating, we're planning, we're problem solving, we're making decisions, and all of these things, I love all these things. These are not opponents to mindfulness. These are natural human capacities that involve having our attention anchored in our imagination, being able to think and plan and predict and evaluate while we're going about that work, which is where we spend most of our attention is usually there most of the time. We're usually thinking. In the background of our awareness, there are all kinds of sensations, things that we can see, things that we can hear, things that we can feel in our bodies. And when we are closely seeing something, like slides reappearing on a screen, or hearing something like a sound in your environment, or feeling something in your body, like a sense of relaxation somewhere, comfort somewhere, or some tension or ache somewhere. When you closely notice a sensation for a handful of seconds and attempt to let your imagination play out in the background, you are exercising your attention with mindfulness. And actually, while we're waiting for the slide to load, because the slide is just supporting what I just said, but this is an opportunity, I think, for us to actually practice something. Noticing your visual experience. Are you looking at the screen? Are you looking at a window? Are your eyes open? Are your eyes closed? And you can decide, I wonder if I can share.
So is anyone seeing a slide at this point? Because I can see it here.
I'm not. It's saying that, for me, it's saying it's not available.
So other people can see it? Like now I'm seeing your screen, Darren.
You are?
but a minute ago I was seeing a slide. What are people? Oh, there we go.
How about that? If you see mine, let's try that for now. And
Okay. Okay.
All right. So let's actually try a little exercise, a short exercise, checking in with your visual experience. What's it like to have your eyes open? And you'll already hear mindfulness exercises always sound a little bit odd because it almost seems so self-evident, self-obvious. But notice what it's like to see. Maybe decide to look at something closely, something in your field of vision, maybe something beyond your computer screen. Or maybe decide to rest your eyes, maybe even closing your eyes. What's it like to notice the darkness behind your eyelids or the swirl of light and dark that appears there? One repetition of mindfulness exercise has two parts. The first part is selecting something to notice. It often includes selecting the category of sensation to notice. In this case, your visual experience. So noticing what it's like to see something right now, or even see the darkness behind your eyelids if you'd like to close your eyes. That's part one. Part two is hanging out there for a few seconds to really observe the sensation without trying to change it. And the duration we're shooting for here is anywhere greater than 0 seconds. Half a second is excellent, up to 3 or 4 seconds. So the range of that close noticing, I like to think of it as a handful of seconds, and there's no lower limit to that. Our attention tends to move. So the bar is really pretty low. What's it like to see the darkness behind your eyelids for a few seconds? And then repeat. Of course, if your eyes are open, I would say, what's it like to have a soft gaze where you're aware of seeing, but you're more curious about what's it like to see than you are in deciding, the idea of, is what you see beautiful, or is it what you want to see? It's more like, what's it like to notice that you're seeing if your eyes are open or if they're closed? And then maybe noticing here, we're not trying to stop thinking. We're just trying to notice the visual experience closely for a few seconds. When we do that, we're setting the stage for thinking to take a backseat. Doesn't mean it's going to go away. It's like we're letting it move into the backseat. We're trying. And in fact, a big part of mindfulness practice is this, trying to let your imagination temporarily take a back seat to your senses. We're coming back to our senses for a few seconds. And then we're just collecting repetitions of this kind of noticing. Let's shift to noticing sounds. And you might play with your eyes being open or closed, noticing how that impacts your exploration of sounds and hearing. See if you can find a sound in your environment to listen to closely in the same way. Find a sound, give it your attention for a handful of seconds, and then either repeat that same sound or see if you can find another sound. If the sound comes to an end, like a car goes by, if the sound comes to an end, just pick back up and find another sound. If there's no sound in your environment, what's it like to listen to the silence? I'm not sure if that's the case for very many people right now. It's something we can compare notes on later. If there's no sound, what's it like to hear the silence? That sounds abstract, but it's actually a really interesting and often calming thing to try to do, try to hear the silence. And again, just to be clear, not trying to get rid of thoughts. We're trying to prioritize attention to hearing sounds. So it could be car goes by, bird sings, refrigerator kicks on, and you're listening to one of those sounds or more of those sounds at the same time. You're hearing sounds around you closely for a few seconds, and it could happen that your mind is either more restful or it could stay active. Either way, the mental activity is secondary to the sensory exploration, if that makes sense. What's it like to take a few repetitions of this without me talking? Find a sound to listen to closely, and then either repeat that sound or find another one. And string a few repetitions of listening in this way together. Let's try this for about a minute. Okay, that's excellent. That's 1 minute. Maybe you noticed that minute seemed long. Maybe you felt like it was short. Actually, does anyone, if anyone wants to hit *6 and weigh in an observation, question about that exercise, or enter into the chat box, feel free to do that. Joy might have to help me because my options for seeing those things don't seem to be there. But
there's, let's see. I really felt my energy slow with my eyes closed. I felt my energy slow and stabilize. These are in the chat.
Nice. Okay, great. And actually, before we move on from here, and I really appreciate the observations. It really helps to make it ground it and feel more tangible to hear each other. I would say one thing about reporting on your experiences of mindfulness. One thing I've learned over the years is when you don't have to be able to articulate it really accurately, even though what you guys did was great. But if you kind of find it hard to put words around it, when you try to explain it, it's actually really instructive for other people listening to hear how challenging it is to put ordinary sensory experience into words. What I have found is that when participants in whatever practice session, are willing to describe their experiences, it seems like the learning, the understanding really goes through the roof, maybe even more so than hearing the teacher talk. The teacher is describing concepts, but the participants are starting to make it real, and we can start to relate to each other's observations. So it's really surprisingly powerful to fumble around trying to describe your experience in this context. So before we move on from this entirely, let's take a minute to notice the body. And I want to just demystify this. This doesn't have to be anything overtly the width of spirituality or woo. It certainly can if that's your thing. It doesn't have to. And it also doesn't have to be that sensations have to be relaxed all the time. For mindfulness, we're getting intimately familiar with sensory experience in all its varieties, and it adds to the richness of that messiness of life. Not just the comfortable, relaxed sensations, but the whole stew. So bringing your attention to your legs and feet and noticing what's there to be felt. Literally noticing the sensations of the legs and feet without trying to change them. So your curiosity is steering this, finding the sensation, feeling it without trying to change it, feeling it, having that be center stage for a handful of seconds, and maybe repeating after that repetition, one leisurely repetition after another of feeling the legs, feeling the arms and hands. Maybe some places are tense and some places are relaxed. Maybe some places are itchy or cold or warm. Just feeling the sensations that are there in the arms and hands. Noticing the face and head. Noticing the chest and abdomen, the back, the whole torso. Noticing the place where your body's making contact with whatever you're sitting on, that pressure of whatever support you find yourself using right now. It's worth mentioning here that mindfulness does not require a fancy yoga posture. You can certainly use one, but you can sit in a chair, you can sit on the couch, you can stand, you can walk, you can lie down. What matters is find a sensation, notice it closely without trying to change it, and repeat. Your eyes can be open or closed. The environment can be quiet or loud. You can start to see how this becomes something when we practice, we can start bringing that out into our lives, where it really starts to make a difference in how we're inhabiting the ordinary moments of our life. I don't run on the treadmill to get good at running on a treadmill. I do it to have more energy and more vitality to engage in my life. It's the same thing. I don't practice mindfulness to get good at sitting still in an empty room or a quiet room. I practice to get more intimately familiar with what it's like to have a body and senses and be able to see and hear and feel and think what happens when I think and what happens when I have emotional responses. And so here's really my hunch. So when I hear mindfulness being discussed, it sounds like this thing that we're not quite sure how to start. When you hear a definition of mindfulness, it can only make sense maybe after you've sort of experienced it. And I think the problem is we ask too much of one definition of mindfulness, and we also try to treat mindfulness as a concept instead of skill development. So I think of mindfulness as two things. It's a natural capacity that you already have, and it's the exercises that can elevate that capacity, make it more robust, make you better equipped to respond to the challenges that we face. So the capacity is the ability to be aware of the present with a kind of composure, a kind of holding it together regardless of what's happening. This capacity gets tested. I think it gets tested when things are really comfortable. Am I able to savor that? Am I able to savor a Saturday morning or a walk on the beach on vacation or a walk in nature? Can I stay? Can I notice what's happening and stay with it instead of trying to make it better? On the other end, what will be more likely to bring someone to a mindfulness class would be to have a challenge of being uncomfortable and to be fighting with it. So stuck in traffic or stuck in a meeting that you'd rather not be in or having a difficult conversation. We have the ability to be aware in the present and hold it together. And sometimes that's more challenging when, for example, we're uncomfortable or there's a loss of control. Say like the traffic's not moving or we're waiting for vaccine for the coronavirus. So there's any number of challenge levels of how uncomfortable a moment could be. And we all have an ability to stay with that discomfort It's not like, what would I say? Just because someone's been practicing mindfulness for a long time doesn't mean they're able to always hold composure no matter what. But I would say that with practice, we can have composure for a greater range of things. And to me, this is the real value. Not that I'm a better person or somehow a spiritual person or that I've transcended all of life's challenges, but that maybe month after month, year after year, I'm starting to be able to stay with challenge a little better, get better at being uncomfortable, since so much of life is going to sort of demand that we do this. So we can develop this capacity by practicing noticing sensations with a kind of openness. That openness refers simply to having it be about curiosity, to really notice at a sensory level what's happening without trying to change it. When we practice hearing sounds, sounds that we like, sounds that we don't like, music, other people talking, when we practice listening closely and letting our imagination move to the background, we're developing the capacity for being aware of the present with a quality of composure or equanimity. Same with when we notice what it's like to see or rest our eyes or feel sensations in our body that are comfortable or uncomfortable or relaxed. It's really important for me to stress this. Mindfulness is not just about savoring relaxation. It's about getting more familiar with the range of sensations that are available to a human to experience. What if we get better at noticing a broader range of sensations? If we start to talk about the body, we're talking about there's an inevitable aches and pains and itches and hungry and tired. There's also relaxation, right? And what I found is the more we stay open to exploring all of it, the better we get at being able to tease out and find relaxation and savor it. So that becomes a skill, not that we get rid of discomfort, but that we are able to tease out relaxation and let that spread by not fighting with the things that we are constantly kind of at battle with. And if we add emotional sensations to this, you can start to see the power of being able to feel something, taking it less personally, fighting with it less. It goes way beyond relaxation and breath awareness in my book. So when we notice sensations habitually in the manner that I'm describing, it prepares us to respond to life's challenges more effectively. And I think right now, at the time of the pandemic and all these things happening in the world as far as related to this, the impact on the economy and the workplace and our health, there's so much uncertainty, and everyone's got fatigue of every kind of trying to navigate working from home, figuring out what to do with the kids, having so much of our work life be virtual like this on a computer screen as opposed to in person. But the way I look at this is, regardless of what's happening, we have this tendency to divide our life into the down the road, my life's going to be better. I'm going to feel more at home later when I've got my problems solved, when I'm comfortable and certain, when I've finished my education, or when I get married, or when I have kids, or when the kids grow up, or when I retire. So we have this habit of projecting a better version of our life that's constantly out of reach, but it's always just up ahead. And what we end up doing is taking the uncomfortable moments that are happening right now and sort of parse them off into, this really isn't my life, this doesn't really qualify as my life doesn't have a pandemic in it, my real life is on the other side of this pandemic, right? This kind of thing. I'm really interested in the habits we have for responding to our sensations habitually right now in the midst of a great challenge. Not only prepares us to have more resilience, more focus, more emotional regulation, self-regulation. I would even go so far as to say empathy and compassion when we practice. Not only are we developing those skills that we will enjoy on the other side of this coronavirus, but I would say we can also start to fold in these messy, uncomfortable, uncertain, moments and say, this is a difficult chapter, but it is my life. My life, I wouldn't plan on this, but here it is. Just like we wouldn't really plan on any grief or aging or illness, right? It's a very large scale. It's almost like I think about it as everyone got sent on a meditation retreat, whether they asked for it or not. And the only problem is there's very little instruction on how to navigate the discomfort of uncertainty. We don't have a lot of voices in the modern world for how to do that. So let's talk about that a little bit. We're exercising our attention in, to some degree, to set the stage for calm, which is more than being calm, as I'm implying. It's about getting more familiar with what it's like to be alive and how that's kind of a moving target. I do not see mindfulness as a way to force yourself to be calm. And in fact, I don't find it very useful to be told to calm down or to try to make myself calm down. This is where I start to think, and this part I'm going to describe here before we do another exercise, is that starts to sound more like Yoda than Mr. Spock. So instead of our rational, logical, problem-solving mode we use for most things, this is kind of a paradoxical nature when it comes to mindfulness. But I think it helps to think of there being 4 levels of awareness or consciousness. Let's start with the one we wish we had more of, which is unconsciousness, being asleep, not being wide awake and aware. That's a valid state of consciousness. It's the restful state. And I think we all know we need more of it than we're getting, and we want more than we're getting. One step up from unconsciousness would be relaxed, where we're not straining, we're not trying to be productive, we're just enjoying our time. Maybe enjoying a meal or a walk or hanging out with friends or family or connecting with people over the phone in a relaxed way. We don't feel the pressure to perform. Then one step up from that is being alert. In alert, we're just a little more tuned in. We're working, there's more effort. We're paying attention to things, we're making decisions, those things I said earlier. We're making sense. It's appropriate to make sense. I'm at work, I'm having a difficult conversation, I'm making an important decision, I need to be alert. And then there's high alert, which is suddenly there's something that demands my attention, a smoke alarm, something runs in front of the car. I get a strong emotional reaction to something, like an email or harsh words, or I see something on social media or in the news that suddenly thrusts me into a state of high alert. So when it comes to mindfulness, then here's the problem. Sometimes, this is important because it's about staying safe and being able to make decisions without having to give it a lot of thought. I just need to hit the brakes or drive around or pull the toast out of the toaster or whatever, or get out of the house. But the problem is sometimes when we find ourselves in a state of high alert, but we're trying to get relaxation or sleep. And this is where it becomes kind of paradoxical. Sometimes the more effort we bring to relaxation, the more we find ourselves in high alert instead. And the problem is that we act as if we can just pick one of these, like it's an item on a menu that we can choose at will. Like we're consumers. I want unconsciousness now. But what happens is, let's say you find yourself awake in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, get up to go to the bathroom, whatever, and you then want to go back to unconsciousness, but you've slept a little bit, you have a little bit more energy, and you're actually, maybe the relaxation is still there, but you're starting to wake up, you're starting to be alert, and your mind is starting to go. When our mind is going and we'd rather be unconscious, we act as if we can just skip over the relaxation part and go right to unconscious. And when we try to pressure that, we try to force that, very often it's not unusual to end up in more of a high alert, because now the stuff we're telling ourselves in our mind relates to, oh gosh, tomorrow I'm going to be exhausted and I'm not be able to get stuff done. So I can, in my effort to force unconsciousness in a state of alertness, I can actually find myself paradoxically in high alert. Where mindfulness comes into play here is that we can practice noticing that all 4 of these states are valid and appropriate and have their place. We can get more familiar with them, fight with them less, and kind of play by their rules, meaning if I want to become unconscious and I'm alert, I need to set the stage for relaxation. I need to invite relaxation instead of forcing it. And this is a skill I can practice. If I'm on high alert, I can use that, leverage that, benefit from that even if the situation calls for it. If the situation doesn't call for high alert, like I'm ruminating and I'm freaking myself out over something that is unknowable or there's something I can do, I can notice I'm on high alert, not fight with that, not try to push it away, but see if I can notice what does high alert feel like, and then I can find myself suddenly nudging down, shifting down to alert. Maybe I can then shift down into relaxation from there. But I don't get to shift from one to the other. So let's try an exercise where we actually explore this idea of what's it like to notice which level of consciousness you're in. I'm assuming, probably not safe to assume that everybody is awake. So if you're asleep, you'll have to listen to this later. But taking a minute to notice, what's your alertness level? Are you in a state of a relaxed state? Do you find that you're alert? Or maybe you're even on high alert. I don't think it's unusual for people to be on high alert right now. But see if you can find the evidence of your alertness level. Where do you look for clues? And I'm starting to steer you back to sensation now. Remember, we're talking about noticing our perceptions. Is it something you notice in your body? Or in your mind? Or both? When I think of the mind, I think of, are you thinking in words? Are you thinking in pictures? When I think of emotions, I think, are you experiencing some emotion, some pleasant or unpleasant emotion right now? And I guess you could just even ask yourself, what's your energy level? One way we can approach mindfulness is just to simply pause and turn our curiosity, our curious awareness towards what's observable right now. What's an indication that I'm hungry or full or tired or exhausted or alert or relaxed? And starting to recognize the sensory composition. What's it like on a sensory level for any of these states? And so maybe you have a sense of your own energy or alertness level right now. And remember, it's not with any kind of a judgment that there's a good or bad, but just a familiarity. This is what it feels like to be alert or relaxed. Let's see what happens when we try a little exercise that we could try this now in this context, but then you can also have it in your back pocket next time you find yourself awake at 2 in the morning or ruminating, feeling like you're on high alert and you maybe don't need to be, or would rather shift down to just alert, to shift to relax. So the exercise is going to build on the things we already did a minute ago, which would be, see if you can find a sound in your environment to listen to closely. Listen closely for a few seconds and then either repeat that same sound or find another sound. And see if you can start to get a rhythm going. Selective attention to external sounds, nice leisurely rhythm. You can zoom in on one sound at a time. See where does that sound seem to be coming from? Or you can explore, listening for sounds in one direction at a time, listening on the right, left, listening above or even below, in front, behind. So you can aim your listening in a direction to explore, or you can cover the whole environment at once, the general sense of the acoustic activity all at once, taking it zooming out to take it all in, hearing it all. But see if you can get a rhythm going of finding something to hear, listening closely, and repeating. Let's try this for about a minute. Your eyes can be open or closed. And you don't need to try to stop thinking. When you lose that rhythm, just jump back in, reestablish it. Our attention wanders. This is what it does. This is part of the game, is realizing our attention wanders. We're trying to get that rhythm going and reestablish it as we need to. Now bringing your attention to your body, and see if you can let your attention be pulled in the same way to one sensation at a time. And notice if the sensation that you're pulled to seems to be active or restful. Active could be physically, a physical sensation like an itch or cold or hungry, or it could be emotional, pleasant, unpleasant emotion, interest, smile, joy, gratitude, or something like fear, restlessness, boredom. See if you can notice where, if you find a sensation that seems to be emotional, where does that seem to be? But maybe the sensation you notice is restful. Maybe your feet are relaxed, or your hands are relaxed, or your forehead. Maybe even a part of the body, not the whole part of the body is relaxed or settled, but maybe part of it is. So let's take 1 minute, letting your attention sort of explore your body sensations, noticing if a sensation is active. See if you can just notice what it feels like and let it be active. And if the sensation is restful or neutral, see if you can enjoy that feeling, that sensation for a few seconds. So no preference between active and restful. More interest in getting a rhythm going of noticing one thing at a time in the body. And then see if you can let whatever is active be there in the background, but see if you can tease out anything that is restful or neutral and really lower the bar here in what you expect to count. It doesn't have to be deeply, deeply relaxed. Relatively restful, tingly, settled, warm, heavy, or even neutral, like the touch of your skin on your clothing is a neutral quality. So the 1 minute of noticing one sensation of something like this, restful or neutral, at a time, maintaining a rhythm of finding rest in the body, savoring it, and repeating. Okay, good. And one last minute of practice, and then we'll compare notes for a couple minutes before we sign off. One last minute. You can actually choose to notice anything you like. You can ignore me here and just notice if any of those were fun, just do the one you like. But the one I'm going to suggest is stay open to both hearing external sounds or feeling relaxation somewhere in the body in the way I was describing, with the bar being low. So it's selective attention, but to two categories: external sound or rest in the body. And the proportions don't matter. Okay, good job. So to kind of summarize this as a practice in life, anytime you're going about your business, you could pause and notice, this is what it feels like to be alert, or this is what it feels like to be relaxed. I think of it, you're kind of taking a data sample. This is what it feels like to be in a kind of a relatively relaxed state. And then if you want to practice this formally, either setting aside time to practice for a few minutes, a minute or two, or 5, or if you find yourself awake in the middle of the night and want to practice, this is a really effective way to respond to the challenge of unwanted alertness in the middle of the night, is to selectively attend to external sounds and any relaxation in the body as a way to set the stage for relaxation and unconsciousness instead of trying to force it. So we have a couple minutes left that we can use to discuss any observations, any questions that you have. And we can turn the recording off probably at this point. So if people want to feel comfortable asking,